Hey everyone, today we're going to be talking about the future of sim racing tracks, and I've got an amazing interview all the way from Los Angeles with Mike from Real Sim Roads, and that's later in the video. Also, we're going to be looking very quickly at the different ways that tracks are currently made in sim racing, and that's at the beginning of the video. Before we jump into that though, do check out the over 300 sim racing videos currently on the channel, and check out our partner site simrace247.com. So first of all, we're going to jump into the way that tracks are actually built, and this is a really good example from one of my friends, David Presino. So most of you may not know David, but he actually built the Surspats Racing test track, the one that you've been seeing in the recent videos. He did a great job of that, and here he is using Blender and showing how you can build a track from scratch. Now David does do a number of courses on how to do this, so do check out his links. I'll put them in the description below, but this is the standard way that a lot of people make tracks on Assetto Corsa and other sim racers. Next up, we have laser scanning. So with tracks, this involves using a laser to create a 3D digital model of a racetrack surface. The laser scanner captures millions of data points, which are then processed to create a detailed map of the track's elevation, curvature and roughness. Of course, then when all this information is on a computer, modders and the people that actually create sim racers can build their own tracks, and that's why we have so many laser scan tracks that are actually converted across all the different sim racers. Here we can see some video of iRacing from a number of years ago on how they create their laser scan tracks, and all the links and the credits are going to be in the description. The third way that we can create tracks on Assetto Corsa and other sim racers is by LiDAR. That stands for light detection and ranging, and it's a sensing technology that uses laser light to detect and measure distances to objects. In the contents of a track, a LiDAR scanner involves sweeping a laser beam across the environment and measuring the time it takes for the light to reflect back to the sensor. By analysing that reflected light, you can build up all the data points that you need to actually then build real environments, and you can see here how accurate that can actually be. And then the last section we've got today is photogrammetry. So this is a technique that involves extracting accurate measurements and 3D information about an object or an environment using photographs. The process involves taking multiple photographs of the subject from different angles and then using software to analyze the images and calculate the shape, size and position of the subject in 3D space. Photogrammetry is used in a variety of fields, including mapping, surveying, architecture and engineering, and today we're going to be talking about it within a sim racing environment. So we do know there has already been some photogrammetry tracks within sim racing, and I've covered a number of these on the channel, particularly the work that Todd Kay's been doing with Santa Monica Mountains. But here we have one of the originals that we saw, and this is by Isavich. So what you can see here is a split screen of the real village that he actually lives in and what it looks like on Assetto Corsa in photogrammetry. It's pretty spectacular, and I will put a link to his video in the description. It's very popular. It's been viewed over 1 million times. But what an amazing thing to do, to build this entire environment with photogrammetry. Now I did mention Todd Kay earlier, and I have covered a couple of his tracks on the channel. Now Todd Kay has been building the amazing Snake and also parts of the Santa Monica Mountains, and we're going to be talking about that subject later on in this video when we speak to Mike. But this is again an amazing achievement to build this, and today we're going to talk more about taking this to the next level. So let's jump into it.
Hey everyone, I'm Mike. I started Real Sim Roads because I am absolutely passionate about photogrammetry and capturing real life and translating it into video games. Sim racing has been a passion of mine for several years, and this was the perfect opportunity to combine my weird fascination with recreating the real world and just cars and driving. So I'm really excited to tell you about photogrammetry in Assetto Corsa.
Hey, so I've got Mike from Real Sim Roads with me now, and he's just going to talk through some of the processes of how he builds these amazing photogrammetry environments in Assetto Corsa. So, Mike, welcome to the channel. It's great to see you. And
Thank you for
Mike's
having me.
Mike's in LA, and I'm obviously in the UK, so there might be a tiny bit of lag, but I think we're okay. So Mike, talk to me about where you start really with this. Where you start when you're trying to put photogrammetry into Assetto Corsa. How does that work?
Yeah, well, I'll back up just a little bit and talk about how I started even getting into
Okay.
this. And I was actually inspired by some of the photogrammetry mods that are out there, especially the Santa Monica Mountains mod. Because I live in LA, I actually used to live up in those mountains. Like those were my
Yeah.
drive home every day roads. So when I started to see what was possible, I started thinking about my background as a filmmaker and a photographer and what can I do to keep pushing the boundaries of what other people had already started. So I did some experimenting and I started out just capturing with like my iPhone and my older camera, trying to see what I could do. And I quickly realized it's a very difficult challenge to
Mm,
get these big projects to align properly. Because essentially what you're doing is you're aligning each individual picture that's taken or video frame. And when you are filming a road, you know, you need to film both sides of the road. You have traffic going by. So what I ended up doing was I got a really high-end camera that shoots more than 8K video, shoots raw video, and I process it into really high-end EXR frames. And so the process is basically just going out and finding a road that's suitable. And that's not such an easy thing to do sometimes because I need the road to be like wide enough that I can kind of hug one side and
mm,
film the other lane and get a lot of overlap in the middle. Because the name of the game in photogrammetry really is overlap, right?
yeah.
It's like getting photos that are 80 to 90% overlapping and then aligning all of them. So finding a suitable road is not the easiest thing. You also don't want a lot of traffic going by. I actually just stop every time there's a
Mm.
car going by so I don't miss any spots on the road or that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of kind of scouting and finding the right locations. I've been lucky enough to find some really good roads by accident around here and up in Lake Tahoe and that sort of thing. But yeah, once I find the road, it's easy enough to just set the camera. I have a tripod semi-permanently mounted in the back of my SUV. So I kind of film like the opposite lane as I'm driving.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, that's as simple as it gets. You know, the capturing is actually the more or less easy part. If you know the right camera settings and you have enough daylight, that's not too difficult. But then once you get home and you start extracting the frames and processing the data, that's when you start to meet some challenges. And I had to come up with a lot of kind of interesting workarounds or develop a workflow that is suited to this type of capture because typically, especially with outdoor locations and photogrammetry, you're filming with a drone or, you know, what Todd Kay did for Santa Monica Mountains. He used a 360
Yeah.
GoPro,
Yeah.
but he was riding around on a bicycle to do it, you know, so he was
Mm.
taking his time. My goal is to really capture as much physical detail as possible and not just the visuals. And, you know, for that, you actually need a really high-end camera that's really high resolution, but you can achieve a quality that's as good as, if not better than laser scans.
Yeah.
Whereas laser scanning is a process that it might take an hour or two to scan like a quarter mile of track or road, and then weeks or months to actually texture that by hand and process everything. But with photogrammetry, you're getting the textures and the physical data
Mm.
all in one. And yeah, there's some pictures on my website, and I can probably send you a few to include in the video. But just you can actually get way more detail in the physical mesh than a set of course it can support.
Yeah.
You know, this is a 10-year-old game engine at this point. It's more or less built for like kind of medium poly, like physical assets. But I noticed that if I take my time, I can actually put a lot more polygons into the game than most
Mm.
people realize.
Yeah.
And you do that by creating a separate visual mesh from the physical mesh. And the physical mesh has no limit to how many polygons it can support. But at the same time, that process becomes more time consuming and challenging. So I'm really looking forward to like some of these new simulators that are coming out, like Rensport, GTR Revival I just heard about, and they're going to be using the Unreal 5 engine,
Mm.
which is much better suited and almost designed for photogrammetry assets.
Yeah.
So as the future of sim racing continues to evolve, I would love to adapt my existing scans and new ones to other sim platforms as well. So not just Assetto Corsa, and really take advantage of all the detail that you can get in these scans.
Mm. So can we talk about data? Because I know you
Yeah,
mentioned before we started filming this that you were talking about 30 terabytes of data, which is just a phenomenal amount of data.
it
Um,
really
so,
is.
so just talk to me about why there is so much data. I presume it's because of the resolution of the camera that you're using, and how that translates then into a better road mesh, because that's ultimately what it's about, isn't it? Getting an accurate road mesh.
Exactly, yeah. So the quantity of data has a lot to do with the approach that I'm taking, which is more of a high-end visual effects workflow. I'm not just trying to do like the minimum, I'm trying to do the maximum.
Mm,
So my camera records 35 megapixel video, right? So every frame is 35 megapixels. And over the course of the last road that I just scanned up in Malibu is about a 10-mile loop. And I scanned it twice. I did one full scan to get the road surface and then a second pass with the camera tilted up to get more of the sides and the
mm,
mountains and things like that. So I used about a terabyte just of raw video. But then once you extract that into individual frames, each frame is somewhere between 150, 200 megabytes.
wow.
And we're talking about 150,000 photos
Mm,
for this 10-mile loop. So you start doing the math and it very quickly adds up to about 30 terabytes.
mm,
And what I've been doing to process this new one is I actually got accepted into an accelerator program from NVIDIA. And they give me credits to use AWS. So I've started using the Amazon servers and actually building out like a render farm to do the calculations. But my God, it's so expensive. It costs over $1,000, about $1,500 US a day
mm,
to do the processing on
wow.
AWS. And a lot of that is actually because of the size of the data, the storage.
Mm,
So they charge you to store the data, they charge you to read and write the data, and they charge you to use the computer time. So I'm actually now looking for kind of an intermediate workflow where maybe I can use JPEGs instead of using these EXR files, because as long as the resolution is there,
mm,
maybe I can afford to lose some of that color depth or what have you. That, if I can get my images down to 5 or 10, 20 megabytes each, I could get the whole thing down under, 5 or 10 terabytes. But that's part of the fun and that's part of the process, is learning like what are the challenges, what are the shortcomings, and engineering solutions to work around that.
mm.
So again, it's like I'm going for the ultimate highest quality because that's what I'm passionate about. I really love just trying to recreate reality as closely as possible, both for the physical sensation and for the photorealism and the visuals. But yeah, there's probably some happy medium where maybe I don't need to be doing the full, EXR 200 megabyte frames. Maybe I can use JPEGs or something to make the process a little bit easier, and using smaller files can also speed up the processing, that sort of thing. But I've noticed that if I use lower resolution, if I try to use like 4K instead of 8K, then the alignment is not quite as easy, especially between the opposite sides of the road. It becomes
Mm,
more of a challenge. Just the more pixels there are in the image, the more data points there are for the software to match between images.
mm.
So not only do I use higher resolution, but I do a lot of sharpening and increase the midtone detail when I'm processing the footage, in order to make sure that the software can align it perfectly. And then I may go back and do like a second export, a different version for the texturing that is a little bit softer and better suited to computer
Yeah.
graphics.
So I suppose everybody watching this is asking, well, why do all this? Because I understand the realism part, because you are effectively mapping the road and the surroundings. But what does it translate to in the game? As a sim racer, or as somebody, playing a game like I said to Corsair, that's playing it for realism, from a
Yeah.
realism point of view. What does it translate to? How does the car react when it's got that kind of detail underneath it?
So I don't want to knock other sims because everyone's doing the best that they
Mm,
can, but or other mods, I mean to say. But when you drive on a mod that's made by hand, they tend to be very flat,
mm,
right? It's like driving on glass. Even if it has the right friction properties, there's not a lot of like cracks or bumps. I haven't really seen any handmade mods that have camber to the road,
mm,
the actual like curvature of the road surface. And camber is a very interesting thing because for instance, on Alpine Meadows, there are a lot of off camber turns,
mm.
right? If you stay in your lane and you try to make a left turn, the road is sloped to the right and it's trying to push you
Yeah,
off the
yeah.
road. So these are sensations that you don't really get in most traditional mods because the level of detail, if they're using a a public LiDAR point cloud, you have point space like 10 centimeters to maybe even a meter apart, depending on the resolution of that data. Whereas my road surface itself has, millimeter precision. So every little bump, every little crack is actually captured in the road mesh, and you feel that in the steering wheel, right? You get more detail in the force feedback. The weight transfer of the car behaves differently. You hit a bump or a crack, and it might send the rear end in the air a little bit, and you get a little oversteer, and you have to correct. So the entire experience becomes more dynamic, more engaging, and cars that you already know and love come alive in an entirely new way. So that's really the benefit beyond just it looking pretty and looking realistic, is that you get a more realistic experience, which actually translates into the real world more easily. So the skills that you develop driving on a map like this are the exact sensations and feelings that you have on a real road, because the road is mapped as closely as possible. And not only that, by developing a process that's relatively fast, relatively easy, anyone can learn to do this if they have a nice enough camera. And actually the nice thing about photogrammetry is that pretty much any gaming PC is the best suited computer for photogrammetry. You need a fast CPU, you need a good amount of memory, and you need a strong GPU with as much VRAM as you can get, right? Same as any sim rig. So if anyone's out there watching this and they want to start learning how to do it, you can. You can take your iPhone and you can set it to like the highest resolution capture you can. You can walk around and take stills, right? You don't have to do video. So it's a process that I want more people to learn how to do, so we can start seeing better and more realistic mods, a more diverse variety of roads. I want to go out and capture roads because I want to drive on them and drive crazy and have a fun time, but do it safely. Don't put myself in danger. No, don't put anyone else in danger. So that's another benefit to doing this, is that I can actually, if I like a road, I can go capture it, bring it home, and drive on it the way that I want to. And that's actually why I'm really excited about the one that I'm working on reconstructing that I scanned up in Malibu. It's a area called Decker Canyon. And if you look it up, people have called it the most dangerous road in Southern California. So I think it's going to be like the perfect type of experience to translate into a simulator, especially because I filmed that and a second road connected to it to make a loop. So it's almost like a Nürburgring in the mountains. It'll just be a
sounds
really
amazing.
fun experience. Yeah, really good for drifting and that sort of thing too.
Okay. I think another question that a lot of people would have is that when are you going to do a racetrack? So, I mean, there are some iconic, amazing racetracks around. I'm lucky enough to have visited lots of them. But even if it was a small regional track, just to try out the technology, is that on the agenda somewhere?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would love to start scanning racetracks sooner rather than later. I think the biggest challenge is just building those relationships and getting permission to not only capture it, but to release it. Because a lot of racetracks, they license their tracks to big games, right? Gran Turismo, Project Cars, Forza, that sort of thing. So I would need to find like a smaller regional track and that sort of thing. And the kind of weird thing about being in California is like the tracks near me are like Willow Springs or like Laguna Seca,
Some would say you're very lucky.
Yeah, exactly. So I would love to build those relationships. If anyone watching this has a track that they'd like me to come out and scan, like please get in touch with me. contact@realsimroads.com. I'm even kind of bidding on a job to go scan go-kart tracks in Mexico using the same technology. So there is interest out there. There are opportunities. But for right now, it's just been easier for me to go out and scan a public road just because I don't have that network yet, or I don't have those relationships. So again, if anyone is watching this seriously, I can travel. My camera equipment is very easy to set up in a rental car, truck. And actually, tracks make for a little bit better subject matter because you can go slow. You don't have to worry about traffic. You can be a little more controlled with the way that you're shooting it. You can fly a drone and get more of the surrounding area and combine it all into one scan. And the process itself is a lot faster than doing a laser scan. So instead of booking a track for a whole day or two and needing to piece it all together, you can scan a track in an hour or two at the most and get an extremely high quality, high resolution scan with every little bump and crack and detail preserved in the match.
Amazing. You
Yeah.
mentioned it earlier on, and I just want to touch on it again. So you were talking about the future and what some of the new sim racers are that are coming out, and just more detail coming and more poly count coming in some of the new engines. So what are you most excited about? What's the new technology that's coming out in those games that you're most excited about? Is it the new Unreal Engine? Is it?
Yeah, it's primarily Unreal Engine because of Nanite, which is
Mm,
this just magical process that allows you to use basically a full resolution photogrammetry mesh, which not only then gives you more detail for the physics engine, but also the lighting. And you can use more advanced PBR
mm,
workflows and texture maps, which photogrammetry is really great for, because even if you do use like a lower poly mesh for the game, you can make normal maps and ambient occlusion maps and displacement maps and use these in the game to enhance the visual quality as well. And Assetto Corsa doesn't do the best job with that. They have their own kind of shader system. It's a little funky, but I've been using as much of the assets that I can to really make what I do stand out from everything else you find for Assetto. But I just am really excited to see how much more real it feels, how much
mm,
more real it looks. And I play in VR primarily. I have a motion seat. So for me, it's really about losing yourself in the simulation. And I find that the more realistic something looks and feels, the more easily I forget that I'm in a simulation. And I
mm.
think that's what I'm most excited about, is just that kind of like imaginary fourth wall just dissolving and really
Yeah.
feeling like you're in this world, in this car, on this racetrack, or on this road.
Mm. And that's what we're all trying to do by sim racing. That is exactly what
Yeah,
we're all trying to do. So
absolutely.
earlier on in this video, I actually showed people Alpine Meadows and showed it running. So if you were going to introduce that and why people should check it out, what would you say?
So I would say that if you are passionate about sim racing, that means that you care about realism, right? This is not just a video game. This isn't just Forza Horizon. This is trying to recreate real life as closely as possible. And as far as I know, I'm the only one doing not just visuals, but physical road mesh using photogrammetry.
Mm,
So if you want the most realistic feel in your driving, if you want more of a challenge, than what you're getting with your current mods, then you absolutely should check out Alpine Meadows. It's a fun, fast, sweeping road with really challenging off-camber turns, a couple dips and cracks here and there that might throw you for a loop. I set it up with AI traffic so you can have fun
mm.
weaving in and out of traffic in there. And it's just a really good preview at what the future is going to bring. I'm certain I'm not the only one who's going to be doing photogrammetry mods. I'm really hoping some of these new simulators will be using it in their actual development process. And I'd even love to work with some of those sims more closely to create assets that maybe get officially released alongside certain games. So this is what the future of sim racing is going to look and feel like. And if you want a taste of it now, then you should definitely go download Alpine Meadows.
Amazing, thank you. Mike, thank you so much for talking to all of the viewers I have at STRIX Game, and they're going to be fascinated about the future of photogrammetry and sim racing as they come together. So thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be ushering this new wave. And if anyone wants to learn more, I have some articles on my website. I have a Discord. People can hop in and chat about photogrammetry. And soon I'll probably start offering tutorials and courses so you can learn how to do this yourself. So stay tuned.
Thank you so much to Mike from Real Sim Roads. I hope you've enjoyed that. It's been fascinating to talk to Mike, and I am going to do a follow-up video to this. All the links are in the description. Do check out Mike's website and check out Alpine Meadows, and also look at all the detail he's got on his website on how these creations are actually made. I do think this is the future of sim racing, and the more computing power we get and the more people that are using photogrammetry, I think we're going to get much better circuits. Thanks for watching. Do check out the rest of the channel, and I'll see you guys very soon.